thank you so much for being part of Aso Morning this beautiful midweek. Well, this is our midweek edition, and I'm welcoming you. At last, our former president has been buried to begin his journey to the ethereal world. Well, as Nigerians and a lot of across the world, tributes keep coming in for him, and I think that's what would characterize our papers this morning. We will start with the newspaper review segment. Go join by Day with sustainability calls, and then agriculture for today and tomorrow, and that'll be it for our midweek edition, Wednesday edition of Aso Morning. Today we'll go for a very short break to return with the newspapers this morning, and I hope as we are getting you ready, you are also mentally ready. I remember someone said the holiday, yesterday's holiday that we all observed in commemoration or in respect, paying our own respect to the former president, is one that could have and should have extended for an entire week. I know a lot of you are still grumbling to go back to work, but I guess we have to move on as a country in spite of the loss. We'll go for a short break to return with the newspapers. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
We are a nation blessed with people of diverse cultures, religions, languages, and opinions. It is ironic that we are now being ripped apart by our greatest strength, our diversity. We have allowed intolerance, insensitivity, bigotry, and nepotism to blind our vision of the greatness we can achieve working together as one. We may not have the same culture, nor religion, nor language, but we all belong to the same nation by the divine will of God. We did not choose to be Nigerians. Nigeria chose us. This nation is our divine heritage, and if we open our eyes.
Welcome back from that break. It's time for the newspapers, and this morning we'll be just starting this segment with the Leadership newspaper this morning. The Leadership has here pictures from the burial of the former president right there. It has dignitaries gracing the occasion, a very sad one there. At last, it says, rest at last. Tinubu, ex-Nigerian leader, Vice President Atiku, Osinbajo, Dangote, others pay final respect to Buhari in Daura, Katsina State. That's what the Leadership is leading with right there. And above the masthead, I am heartbroken. Buhari's daughter shares her grief. I am heartbroken. Next, Awujale to emerge after 3 months mourning. Next, Awujale to emerge after 3 months mourning. Remember, the news came simultaneously of the death of the Awujale as soon as we got death of the former president. And it is saying here that after 3 months of mourning, the next Awujale would be announced. Well, we move on from the National Star newspaper this morning, where it says world leaders pay tribute, pay last respect as Buhari laid to rest in Daura. World leaders pay last respect as Buhari laid to rest in Daura. Tinubu, Niger, Guinea-Bissau leaders, governors, others attend funeral. Atiku, Osinbajo, others pay tribute. Okay, moving away from that story, it has here just below the masthead, politicians leading Nigeria into failed state. Former Governor Dixon, Senator Dixon, is saying, former governor of Bayelsa State, says politicians leading Nigeria into failed state. Tinubu directs MDAs to comply with US UAE visa reciprocity policies. Tinubu directs MDAs to comply with US UAE visa reciprocity policies. You wonder what that means? Comply with the US UAE visa reciprocity policies. Does this mean he's not going to do something about it? Well, that story is on page 8 of the National Star newspaper. You may recall that Nigeria has been having, and I think it's not just Nigeria, but mostly African countries have been having a lot of stiff restrictions, visa restrictions, and while it was said that especially the U.S. visa restriction or visa policy, new policy, was reciprocity, the president is directing MDAs to comply. TikTok deletes 3.6 million Nigerian videos in first quarter of 2025 over policy breach. That story is on page 21 of the National Star newspaper. Wondering why your videos may have been deleted? Well, go check it out and maybe get to learn about the policies and follow it so that you do not fall prey to some of these policies. 35 countries in Nigeria for third CAA African Under-18, Under-20 Athletic Championship. IBAS inaugurates the RISIEC, I think that's the Rivers State Electoral Commission, to conduct Rivers local government polls. 27 killed as terror returns to Plateau State. That's an unfortunate story right there. Campaign against me if you can, Wike dares Senator Kingibe. Campaign against me if you can, Wike dares Senator Kingibe. Federal government committed to reducing transportation costs through CNG. That's coming from the Presidential CNG Initiative. Crimes, FCTA impounds 280 vehicles. Wondering why that happened? It's on page 20 of the paper. And finally here, CBN's new Naira exchange rate boosts currency's grip over dollar. Would you agree? Well, you could pick the paper and learn more. That's on page 14 of the National Star. With that, we move on now to the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. The Patriot all-inclusive confab begins in Abuja. Remember, the Tribune newspaper has been talking about the Patriots confab that's going to happen. Well, it begins in Abuja. Delegates set to discuss future of constitutional democracy, plan to draft what they term as the People's Constitution. Plan to draft the People's Constitution. Moving on from that, sea of heads as Buhari's state funeral in Daura features full military honors. The writer here says Tinubu, Shetima, Atiku, African leaders, governors, military leaders, ministers, family, others pay last respect. The details of that story is on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. But above the masthead, still talking about the Plateau killings. Gunmen kill 27, destroy farms, burn several houses in Plateau community. Visa overstay. Respect immigration regulations of host country. Federal government tells Nigerians. Oh, that's coming in. That's coming in very, very timely. I hope Nigerians listen so that we are not embarrassed with these visa restrictions that we keep getting over and over. Dangote to wealthy Nigerians. Invest in Nigeria. Reveals how he built $20 billion refineries. Is tasking wealthy Nigerians to invest in country. He also had some time ago cried out, and I am using the phrase very, very intentionally, cried out about how difficult regulations are, and sometimes he expects that he would have been given a softer, or rather should have been supported to invest and get his investment working, but he did not get that kind of support from government agencies, where he expected they should celebrate an indigenous refinery, an indigenous entrepreneur who is doing so much, which would of course trickle to more employment for young people. Not to mention the pressure on our naira would be less, and yet he didn't get that. somehow I feel like he has gotten a hang of it, and he's asking Nigerians to invest in the country. We would definitely be better for it. We move on from there to the Business Day newspaper this morning. 6 universities, MTN, NDA, 16 others dump greed over blackout. This is what we have always talked about. There's no reason why the universities with their research and development departments should depend on the national grid for electricity. Remember, we had recorded so much debt that universities owed the discos, and I was wondering, why should the universities not champion solar alternatives? Why should universities not research and do more in alternative electricity generation for the schools? But I'm happy to announce now that 6 universities, MTN, NDA, 16 others dump national grid, and we want more people to get off the national grid so that it would not be overloaded. Remember, unfortunately, last year we recorded over 7 national grid collapse. If we have less load, we will have less pressure on these facilities that was reported or is being reported to be dilapidated, some very old. Okay. With that, we move on to other stories still on the Business Day newspaper. It says rising investor confidence fuel new manufacturing investment. That's exciting, that in spite of everything, we have manufacturers or investors confident to manufacture in the country. It says here, after several years of shutdown and stalls of investment, manufacturers are finally investing up their factories. I think that's what it says here. Okay, it's quite tiny. I can't read it. I wish I could give you an excerpt of what is written there, but long story short, Nigeria is getting a boost in the investment sector where manufacturers are beginning to feel confident enough to invest in the country. Buhari championed social housing but left deficit untouched. That's an editorial right there on page 21 of the Business Day newspaper. Okay, I think that's about it for the paper. We move on now to the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The Daily Trust newspaper has here how Buhari was honored, buried, and it has, in fact, the Daily Trust dedicated the entire front page to the burial of the former president, Muhammad Buhari. Here it has pictures of the president bowing to the corpse of the former president. Right there we see dignitaries all over. Daura really came alive for the past president, and it was beautiful to watch the love, the deluge of love and tributes that came for the former president. It is beautiful. But that's it for the Daily Trust that just said here how Buhari was honored and buried. To the Vanguard newspaper we go this morning. Tinubu, some African leaders bid Buhari farewell. That's what the Vanguard is leading with this morning. And it has writers here says, I ignore Buhari's 8 years in power. He was a good man. Is that what it says? Okay, ignore Buhari's 8 years in power. He was a good man. Kuka said that. Ignore Buhari's 8 years in power. He was a good man. Says late president was a good man. Buhari's statesman who came, saw, conquered. Sultan is saying, Buhari's statesman who came, saw, and conquered. I will carry your memory with me. Buhari's daughter, Noah, is saying. Noor, I think that's what it says here. Late president goes home in blaze of glory and honor. As Ale Babalola, Mustafa, Emami, Dixon, Pantami pay tribute. I've forgiven Buhari for any infractions. Galadima is saying, I've forgiven Buhari for any infractions. I guess that's what we keep saying, right? Let's always forgive. But if you want to know what infractions he may be talking about, that story is on page 15 of the Vanguard newspaper. Thank you for forgiving the past president, I guess. Above the masthead of the paper here, it says, again, Nigeria misses budget 2025 crude oil output target. Again, Nigeria misses budget 2025 crude oil output target. We are yet to receive formal communications from UAE on revised visa policy. Federal government is saying gunmen allegedly killed 20 in Plateau night raid. That's an unfortunate one. Ex-APC National Chair Oyegun registers with ADC in Edo State. That's a big one. Ex-APC National Chair Oyegun registers with ADC in Edo State. Frankly, I didn't see it coming. He actually has been quiet for a very long time now, but it's good to know that he's politically still there enough to join the ADC. That's exciting. I guess APC has to buckle up, as even strong members of the party are leaving for this ADC. Call it what you may, but it is also having a lot of strong political figures join them. But is that enough to unseat an Asiwaju? Time will tell. We move on from that to the Punch newspaper this morning. The Punch says, final salute. Nigeria beats Buhari, emotional farewell. Final salute. Nigeria beats Buhari, emotional farewell. The writers here says, Tinubu, Akpabio, service chiefs, governors pay final respect amid tears and tribute. Tinubu, Akpabio, service chiefs, governors pay final respect amid tears, tribute. Wow. Daura stands still as Katsina Airport records over 130 flights. Katsina Airport records over 130 flights. I was reading an analysis earlier today where someone said, imagine Katsina didn't have an airport. Imagine the road from Katsina to Daura was not hard. Imagine the president didn't do that in his state. He would have had issues with his funeral. It would have been a bumpy ride with his corpse, but he did that. And of course, the analysis went to other presidents or the public office holders who it would be very tough to take their corpse should they pass on to their resting place. Well, that's it. We have other stories. Osibanjo ex-governors join African leaders, Saudi King Prince to mourn Buhari right there. And at the footer of the Punch newspaper, Nigeria's oil output soars above OPEC quota. That's exciting. For a very long time, we were struggling to meet OPEC quota. But today, we can announce that Nigeria's oil output soars above OPEC quota. North Central states mobilize joint security to crush bandits. I guess we need to look inward. That's another good one right there, where we would see if this joint security is it going to operate beside the JTF? Is it well, we would get to know what it means, and that story is on page 26 of the Punch newspaper. You could pick it to understand what these states in the North Central planning to crush bandits, what it would entail. Well, we move away from that story to the one above the masthead of the Punch newspaper. It says, marketers protest as Dangote moves to crash cooking gas price. Marketers protest as Dangote moves to crash cooking gas price. I would need to get an economist to make sense of it. I mean, when Dangote was also to crash the price of PMS, marketers complained. And I'm asking, this is the healthy competition in business we kept talking about. Dangote's gas would be crashed. You go find your ways of if you're a marketer, right? That's the maybe naive or myopic way of saying it. There's competition. You go continue with gas anywhere else you would want to get it, but Dangote is going to continue with his business. If you want to be competitive, go get it from somewhere else. But why are you protesting the reduction? It's almost as if you do not want progress, or you do not want, like the president to say, Nigerians, the poor Nigerians, to breathe, go get your gas where you find it conducive. Let Dangote reduce his price or slash his price if he wants. But I will never understand it. Maybe I'll get an economist to understand this rivalry between marketers, the Association of Marketers and Dangote. And I think that is why Dangote went on that very intense advert for, I think, truck owners, I think so that they can lift his products. Because about these marketers, are they frustrating him? I don't understand. But they are protesting Dangote's move to crash cooking gas price. I will understand it someday, but it isn't today. But for some of you who would want to hear that, read that story, is on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. We would read it together, maybe analyze it tomorrow here on the show. But I have to understand why, of all the chain, the value chain, marketers protest when Dangote slashes prices of his commodities, or of his products rather, of his petroleum products. I probably would get the hang of it. Over 420 federal roads completed or in progress, the federal government is saying. Over 420 federal roads completed or in progress. That's something to celebrate, isn't it? But with that, we move away from the Punch newspaper to the Nigerian News Direct newspaper this morning. National mourning commences as former President Buhari laid to rest in Daura. And the rider here says, Tinubu, Guinea-Bissau President, Niger Prime Minister, other dignitaries storm Katsina. State honors tight security as Osibanjo Amechi, others bid farewell. EU mourns ex-president, condoles with Nigerian government and citizens. That's it. We also have here the Nigerian News Direct newspaper, the entire front page taken by the pictures of the funeral. We have the president here with the son of the late former president. And at the footer rather of the Nigerian News Direct newspaper, why I support 6 years single tenure for president and governors, or your speaker is saying. You want to know why he supports a single tenure of 6 years? That story is on page 13 of the Nigerian News Direct newspaper. London Mayor, Lagos government review partnership to boost digital transformation. I always celebrate partnerships like this. I'm sure there's always academic exchange and innovative exchanges as well. Boost digital transformation. Yes, that's where our young people and their energies are right there. And it's good that the Lagos state government is really looking at what this partnership would be. I know young people would benefit from it. NNPC Limited, Akwa Ibom GACN signed $3.5 billion gas agreement. That story is on page 5 of the Nigerian News Direct newspaper. Why wealthy Nigerians should invest in Nigeria despite corruption. That's coming from Dangote. I told you he had he had a sting. I mean, investing in Nigeria was not child's play for him. In spite of that, he charged and moved on, and today he has a running refinery amongst the other businesses that he's got. So in spite of all that, he's saying wealthy Nigerians really need to invest in Nigeria. And with that, we move on to the First News newspaper. End of an era. That's how it phrases it. End of an era. Buhari buried in Daura with full state honors. Tinubu, Shetima, foreign dignitaries pay last respect to ex-president. Additional, Buhari escaped early death by avoiding Nigerian hospital. Additional is saying that Buhari escaped early death by avoiding Nigerian hospitals. That, if I can air my opinion, is the most insensitive thing that Additional could have said. So what happens to Nigerians who would be unable to travel out of the country? So what happens to ensuring that this... He was in government. He was a spokesperson to the former president. That's the most shameless and insensitive thing you could say, when your government could have done something to improve Nigerian hospitals so that it is not early death. So you are, oh my goodness. Let's move on from that story, because I'm getting emotional for several Nigerians who cannot even afford pharmaceuticals for routine drugs. We had conversations right here in the studio. We're not even talking about hospital facilities now. We're talking about how bad the economy is, that Nigerians cannot even take the diabetes drugs that they are supposed to, the hypertension drugs that they are supposed to. These are drugs that are life saving for them. They can no longer afford it. That's where we are. We are no longer talking facilities. We're talking about how we can even afford pharmaceuticals. And you're telling me how the president, who could have done better for the health sector, has to travel out so he avoided early death. I wish public office holders could have some shame, really. Well, above the masthead, leaving that story right there. Farewell, Buhari, may the soil rest gently upon you, Atiku is saying. And over 100 still hospitalized after Benue massacre. Community leaders, that's coming from community leaders in Benue State, talking about the unfortunate incidents that's been going on in Benue State, saying over 100 still in the hospital after that attack. SEC, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, probes 79 suspected Ponzi schemes in crackdown on investment fraud. Remember, we had an investment expert yesterday here on the show who discussed why, unfortunately, Nigerians are still falling prey to these Ponzi schemes. Why? You must give it to the Securities and Exchange Commission. They keep publishing names of these schemes you should never consider, but Nigerians do not listen. 79 suspected schemes cracked down on investment fraud. Nigerians would always fall prey. The most saddening thing, like we established yesterday, was some of them, when you point it out and say, no, it's too good to be true, you can't afford, they tell you, we know, but before it crashes, I would have cashed out. That's the and some would tell you, no, this one would not crash, because as long as people keep joining in, it would not crash. But people lose money every year, every month. We announce this, and yet Nigerians still join this. Ogun workers reject pension scheme, demand minimum wage. Well, that story is on page 16 of the First News newspaper. Burna Boy, I regret calling Afrobeat shallow. I regret calling Afrobeat shallow. Well, pick a paper, go see why Burna Boy called Afrobeat shallow and why he's regretting it now. Federal government reaffirms strong ties with the US, UAE amid visa row. And that's the last story we'll be taking on today's edition of the newspaper review segment. We'll go for a short break. Remember, Sustainability Pulse with a by day is coming up next. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We are a nation blessed with people of diverse cultures, religions, languages, and opinions. It is ironic that we are now being ripped apart by our greatest strength, our diversity. We have allowed intolerance, insensitivity, bigotry, and nepotism to blind our vision of the greatness we can achieve working together as one. We may not have the same culture, nor religion, nor language, but we all belong to the same nation by the divine will of God. We did not choose to be Nigerians. Nigeria chose us. This nation is our divine heritage, and if we open our eyes, we will realize that what divides us pales in comparison to what unites us. And by the comparison and conciliation of our differences, we will grow until our differences disappear. Our unity cannot be willed by mere declarations, Nor do we get unity by ignoring the questions that beg for answers. We must celebrate our diversity and debate our differences without fracturing our unity. Our strength is not in our numbers, but in our unity, because even the weak become strong when united. Nigeria unite.
This message is brought to you by Abuja Broadcasting Corporation, owners and operators of Aso Radio 93.5 FM Abuja, Aso Television DSTV Channel 392, Star Times Terrestrial Channel 127, Free TV Channel 507, People's TV Channel 285, and UHF Channel 38.
The welfare of millions of people for generations to come may be affected by the wisdom which we here display. If Nigerian leaders and our British partners are to prove themselves worthy of their trust, now is the time for us solemnly and truly to dedicate ourselves to seeking the greatest good of the greatest number of our people in Nigeria. Independence for Nigeria in 1960 is imperative. But independence for Nigeria as a corporate entity is not enough. The peoples of Nigeria must at the same time be guaranteed their freedom. We must ensure that in an independent Nigeria, individual citizens throughout the land enjoy liberty, human dignity, and equality under the law. There must be one Nigeria with one constitution and one law for all. Let us therefore, Mr. Chairman, sir, close our ears to the counsel of despair, which says that we cannot here at this conference agree on a constitution. If there is any doubt among us as to what should be written into the constitution, let us, as Democrats that we profess ourselves to be, refer such problems, as the goal has done recently, to the people whom we profess to represent, either just before or at the federal elections late in 1959.
Our first efforts at democracy and self-government were abruptly arrested in the mid-60s, largely as a result of the incongenial atmosphere engendered by the uncompromising stance adopted by the political parties of the First Republic. Thus, opportunities were lost for our people to interact and learn to accommodate different points of view for the betterment of the country. We must not allow that episode to repeat itself. The new system that will have adopted presents us with yet another opportunity to achieve national integration, which is a prerequisite for the building of a strong and virile nation.
Loss and damage. Who pays when Africa suffers? Hello and welcome to Sustainability Pulse with Ebaide, the show where we bring climate clarity into our daily lives, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Ebaide, and today we are diving deep into one of the most contentious and urgent issues in climate justice: loss and damage. This is part 2 of our Climate Equity and Accountability series, and if you missed part 1 on adaptation funding, don't worry, I'll catch you up as we go on. But today, we are tackling something that keeps all of us, or most of us, at night. And frankly speaking, it should actually keep all of us, not just me or people who are in climate change conversations. Now, picture this. You are a farmer in northern Nigeria. Your grandfather farmed this land. Your father farmed this land. And now you do the same thing on the land. But the rains that came predictably for generations, they are all gone. The soil that was once fertile is becoming desert. The crops that fed your family and your community, they are failing year after year. Now, you didn't cause this crisis. Nigeria contributes less than 0.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. But you're here paying the price, literally. Your livelihood, your home, your way of life, all gone. And the question, the burning question in your mind, the question we're exploring today is, who pays when Africa suffers? At COP28 in Dubai, wealthy nations made a historic commitment. They agreed to establish a loss and damage fund. There was applause, there were tears, there were promises. But here we are well into 2025, and the reality on ground tells a different story. The promises are stuck in bureaucracy. The money is trickling in slower than, most structures you might think of. Africa are still bearing the brunt of a climate crisis they didn't create. Today, we're going to examine the numbers, the stories, and most importantly, what this means for everyday African. and of course, what we can do about it. So grab your coffee, your tea, whatever it is you have, settle in, let's have an honest conversation about climate justice, money, and power. We'll go on a short break, and once we are back, we'll delve into the global headlines, you know, the pulse. Let's look at the pulse and let's look at the numbers, and we would continue on this conversation. Please, after the break.
Africa stands at the front lines of the climate crisis. Over 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. 1 in 3 face food insecurity due to climate-induced droughts and floods. By 2050, over 100 million people on the continent could be pushed into extreme poverty because of climate change. Plastic waste is piling, forests are vanishing, coastal cities are sinking. Yet, we are not powerless. Africa is also the youngest continent with 60% of its population under 25. We hold the energy, innovation, and drive to reshape the future. From solar-powered villages to bold climate tech, from green entrepreneurs to eco-warriors in slums and cities, the pulse of sustainability is rising. This is Sustainability Pulse with Ebaide, the show where truth meets urgency and action meets hope. Together, we decode the data, amplify the change makers, and reclaim Africa's future, one story at a time. This is not just a show, it is a movement. Welcome to The Pulse. Africa stands at the front lines of the climate crisis. Over 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. 1 in 3 face food insecurity due to climate-induced droughts and floods. By 2050, over 100 million people on the continent could be pushed into extreme poverty because of climate change. Plastic waste is piling, forests are vanishing, coastal cities are sinking. Yet, we are not powerless. Africa is also the youngest continent with 60% of its population under 25. We hold the energy, innovation, and drive to reshape the future. From solar-powered villages to bold climate tech, from green entrepreneurs to eco-warriors in slums and cities, the pulse of sustainability is rising. This is Sustainability Pulse with Ebaide, the show where truth meets urgency and action. Together, we decode the data.
That might sound like a lot of money. That might sound like a lot of money, but context is everything. As of mid-2025, only $321 million has actually been paid into the fund. That's less than half of what was promised. And here's the kicker. The fund has officially approved just $250 million for disbursement throughout 2026. To put this in perspective, that's roughly what Netflix spends on content in a single month. Yes, we are talking about addressing centuries of climate injustice with less money than a streaming service spends on entertainment. Now, Africa needs, and I want you to really hear this, the number, over $400 billion annually. That's what Africa needs just to address loss and damage. 400 billion, can you beat that, is what we need. And the approved $250 million represents 0.6% of what's actually needed. It's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a teaspoon. But wait, there's more context we need to understand. The Green Climate Fund, that's a separate pot of money, plans to release $1.2 billion across 17 projects, most in Africa and Asia. This signals potential synergy between climate funds, which is encouraging, by the way, but it also highlights the fragmented nature of climate finance. We have the Loss and Damage Fund, we have the Green Climate Fund, we have the Adaptation Fund, bilateral agreement, and dozens of other mechanisms. It's like having 20 different bank accounts when you need to pay one massive bill. The bureaucracy is killing us, literally. I spoke with one lady, you know, from climate finance sometime, an expert in these things some time ago, and she said something. She said, we're not just fighting climate change. No. She said, we're not just fighting climate change anymore. We are fighting climate bureaucracy, which is true. And bureaucracy doesn't care if your crops are dying, same farmlands.